This is the ghost story of the Hotel Boulderado. The Boulderado opened on New Year's Day in 1909. It was built because people in Boulder in the early 20th century decided Boulder needed a really nice hotel. People around town put up their money to have the hotel built. As they were building it, there was a lot of discussion about what they should call the hotel because, just like today, back in the early 20th century, everybody in Boulder had an opinion on everything. Some people want to name the hotel after A.J. Mackey, a prominent banker and businessman who'd invested in the hotel but died as they were starting to build it. Other people said, no, let's call it the Boulder Hotel so people who stay here remember what city they were in when they stayed in this great hotel. But that wasn't good enough because there's a Boulder in a lot of western states. So they took Boulder and Colorado and they smushed it together and called it the Boulderado. And L.J. Paddock, who was the editor of the Daily Camera, our local paper, called that name a rhetorical monstrosity. Well, some people liked the name. Maybe one couple that did was Lou and Mary Ellen Pfeiffer. They were a couple from Denver who came here on the train in 1923. They checked into a room on the third floor of the Boulderado. After they checked in, Mary Ellen went into the bathroom to take a bath. And when she came out, there's her husband Lou lying dead on the bed. Now, some wives would have been upset by this, or at least surprised, but not Mary Ellen. Not because she killed Lou. It's sadder than that. Lou had been suffering for a while from terminal kidney disease. He was going broke, feeling awful, and knew he didn't have long to live, so Lou had decided to end his life on his own terms. Mary Ellen couldn't live without her husband, so they'd made a suicide pact and come to the Boulderado to carry it out. Isn't that romantic? So Mary Ellen picks up the washcloth full of chloroform that's on Lou's face, lies down next to him on the bed, puts it on her own face, and prepares to die. But there's two things Mary Ellen didn't know. One is that Lou had also taken a handful of sleeping pills. That's what killed him. The other is that chloroform's an anesthetic, just knocks you out. So she loses consciousness, but she wakes up a couple hours later, not dead. And she's pretty upset by this. She doesn't want to fail in this pledge she made to her now departed husband. So she decides she better do something about this. Of course, the first thing she does as she's leaving her room, she puts a do not disturb sign on the door, which is what you always want to do when you're leaving a dead body in a hotel room. She goes down to Pearl Street to a pharmacy run by a man named George Fonda and asks George for a pound of chloroform. George looks at her kind of funny and says, lady, that's an awful lot of chloroform. And this is Boulder. We sell drugs by the ounce here. Well, he sells her 4 ounces. She brings that back, puts it in a towel, lays down again on the bed next to Lou, puts a towel on her face, and again prepares to die. Of course, the same thing happens. She wakes up a couple hours later with a horrible headache and burns on her face and her neck from the chloroform. But she ain't dead. She decides this was a bad idea. It wasn't meant to be. So she goes back to Denver, checks herself into a hospital to have her burns looked at. And that was the first suicide that took place on the third floor of the Boulderado. On the 4th of July, 1963, a 40-year-old man from Pittsburgh checks into a room on the third floor. A little while later, the staff hears a loud bang. Well, it could just be fireworks. It's the 4th of July. They decide they better look around. Eventually, they look on the fire escape. There's the dead body of this 40-year-old guy, shotgun in his hand. In his room, no suicide note, just the receipt for the gun he bought that morning at McGuckin's. 4 years later to the day, 4th of July, 1967, a 30-year-old man from Boulder who had just inherited $1 million. And this is back when that was a lot of money. Not the average home price like it is here now. He checks into a room on the third floor. Again, the staff hears a loud bang. This time they open the door to the guy's room, find him dead on the bed, still smoking 357 Magnum in one hand, still smoking hash pipe in the other, glass of red wine on the table next to him. No suicide note. So we got 3 suicides on the third floor of the Boulderado. Staff at the front desk of the Boulderado sometimes gets interesting calls from people staying on the third floor who've seen and heard all kinds of weird stuff. Sometimes they come on the Banjo Billy bus and tell us about it. I had a woman on my tour a couple of years ago, told me she was staying in a room on the third floor. She woke up in the middle of the night. There was an image of a man hovering in the corner of her room. Stayed there for about half an hour. The next morning, when she's packing to leave, her sunglasses flew off the bed across the room. Other people have seen shadows chase each other across the floor. They've heard a man walking next to the bed. They hear his footsteps. They hear him muttering to himself, but they can't make out what he's saying. They see the hands on the clock in the room. go backwards and forwards and then backwards and forwards. They've seen the mirror, the vanity mirror, fog up when there's no water running in the room. I even had a man waiting for me outside the bus one day at the end of a tour. He'd been on our tour, then he stayed on the third floor of the Boulderado, and he had to tell me what happened. He was in his room talking to his wife. They were the only two people in the room, but in the mirror, he sees a man walk behind him. Most interesting of all, in the corner of the lobby by the corner bar, is the original elevator from when the Boulderado opened. It's an Otis 1908, one of those old-timey ones with a gate door. It's not old-fashioned, though. It has its own Twitter account. Sometimes when that elevator goes up and approaches the third floor, a woman appears in the elevator, 1920 style blue dress. When the door opens on the third floor, she steps across the threshold to get off, and she disappears again. And people think that's the ghost of Mary Ellen Pfeiffer, come to look for her beloved husband, Lou. See, I told you it was romantic. So that's the ghost story of the Boulderado. Fasten your seatbelts. Let's go.